Millionaire discovers a conversation between his son and the nanny. What he heard was extremely disturbing. Welcome to the channel. Enjoy the video, give it a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, comment and share. The warm glow of the evening sun painted the sky over Krakow in hues of orange and pink as Tomasz Nowak pulled into the driveway of his suburban home. The 45-year-old furniture factory owner sat in his car for a moment, savoring the peaceful silence before stepping into what he expected to be another ordinary evening with his family. Little did he know that this night would be the beginning of a series of events that would turn his world upside down. As Tomasz entered the house, the usual sounds of his wife Anna preparing dinner in the kitchen and his 16-year-old son Michal's muffled music from upstairs greeted him. He hung his coat and made his way to the kitchen, where the aroma of Anna's famous pierogi filled the air. "Hello, darling," Tomasz said, planting a kiss on Anna's cheek. "How was your day?" Anna, a 42-year-old primary school teacher, turned to face him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It was fine," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of hesitation. "But there's something we need to talk about later." Tomasz felt a twinge of concern but nodded, assuming it was probably about Michal's recent rebellious behavior. "Of course," he said. "After dinner?" Anna agreed, and they called Michal down for the family meal. As they sat around the table, Tomasz couldn't help but notice the tension in the air. Michael picked at his food, barely making eye contact with either of his parents. "So, son," Tomasz began, trying to break the uncomfortable silence, "how was school today?" Michal shrugged, his eyes fixed on his plate. "Same as always," he muttered. Anna cleared her throat. "Michal, why don't you tell your father about the call I received from your math teacher?" The teenager's head snapped up, his eyes wide with alarm. "Mom, you promised you wouldn't—" "I promised I'd let you tell him," Anna interrupted gently. "But you've been avoiding it for days." Tomasz looked between his wife and son, confusion and concern etched on his face. "What's going on?" Michal sighed heavily, pushing his plate away. "I'm failing math," he admitted reluctantly. "Mr. Kowalski says if I don't improve I might have to repeat the year." The news hit Tomasz like a punch to the gut. His son, who had always been a promising student, was now at risk of failing. How had he not noticed this? "But why?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice calm. "You've always been good at math. What changed?" Michal's eyes darted to his mother, then back to his plate. "I don't know," he mumbled. "It's just harder now." Anna reached out to touch her son's hand. "We're not angry, Michal. We just want to understand and help you." Tomasz nodded in agreement, but his mind was racing. Was this why Anna had seemed so tense earlier? Or was there more to it? As if reading his thoughts, Anna turned to him. "There's something else, Tomasz. I overheard a conversation today that, well, it's quite disturbing." Tomasz felt his heart rate quicken. "What kind of conversation?" Anna glanced at Michal, who was now staring at her with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I'd rather discuss it in private," she said softly. The rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. As soon as Michal excused himself and retreated to his room, Tomasz followed Anna to the living room, his anxiety growing with each step. Anna sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Tomasz, I heard Michal talking on the phone earlier. He was speaking to someone, a woman." Tomasz furrowed his brow. "A woman? Who?" "I'm not sure," Anna replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the way they were talking, and it wasn't normal. Tomasz, it sounded intimate, secretive. I heard Michal say something about meeting her tomorrow after school." The implications of Anna's words hit Tomasz like a tidal wave. His teenage son, involved with an older woman. It was unthinkable. "Are you sure you heard correctly?" he asked, desperately hoping for a misunderstanding. Anna nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I wish I wasn't. But there's more, Tomasz. I heard a name, Karolina." Tomasz felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Karolina. It couldn't be. Could it? His mind raced back to the new production manager he had hired at the factory just a month ago. Karolina Witkowska, a talented and ambitious woman in her late 30s. But surely it had to be a coincidence. There was no way she could be involved with his son. "We need to talk to Michal," Tomasz said firmly, standing up. "We need to get to the bottom of this." But as they approached Michal's room, they heard the muffled sound of voices. Tomasz and Anna exchanged a worried glance before Tomasz gently pushed the door open. Michal was sitting on his bed, phone pressed to his ear, his back to the door. He hadn't heard his parents enter. I know, Michal was saying, his voice low and urgent. but we can't keep this a secret forever. They're going to find out eventually, and it'll be worse if—" He suddenly tensed, sensing the presence behind him. Slowly, he turned around, his face draining of color as he saw his parents standing in the doorway. "I have to go," he whispered into the phone before ending the call. The silence that followed was deafening. Tomasz could hear his own heart pounding in his ears as he stared at his son, a stranger he suddenly didn't recognize. "Michal," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "Who were you talking to?" The teenager's eyes darted between his parents, panic evident in his expression. It's not what you think," he stammered. Anna stepped forward, her face a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Then tell us what it is, sweetheart, because right now, we're imagining the worst." Michal opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, tears welling up in his eyes. "I can't," he whispered. "I promised I wouldn't say anything." Tomasz felt a surge of anger and fear. "Promised who, Michal? This Karolina? Is she the one you've been talking to?" The look of shock on Michal's face confirmed their suspicions before he could even speak. How do you know about her?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "That's not important right now," Tomasz said firmly. "What's important is that you tell us exactly what's going on. Now." But before Michal could respond, Tomasz's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, intending to ignore the call, but froze when he saw the name on the screen, Karolina Witkowska. With trembling hands, Tomasz answered the call. "Hello? Mr. Nowak?" Karolina's voice came through, sounding stressed and slightly breathless. "I'm sorry to bother you at home, but there's been an accident at the factory. A fire broke out in the main production area. The fire department is here." "But it's bad, sir. You need to come quickly." Tomasz felt as if the ground had disappeared from under his feet. His factory, the business he had built from the ground up, was in danger. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this crisis at work was somehow connected to the crisis unfolding in his home. "I'll be there as soon as I can," he managed to say before ending the call. Anna and Michal were staring at him, sensing that something was wrong. "What is it?" Anna asked, her earlier concerns momentarily forgotten. "There's been a fire at the factory," Tomasz explained, already moving towards the door. "I have to go." As he rushed out, grabbing his coat and keys, Tomasz's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The mysterious conversation between his son and an unknown woman, the name Karolina echoing in his ears, and now a fire threatening to destroy everything he had worked for. How were these pieces connected? And more importantly, what secrets were being kept from him? Tomasz started his car, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. As he pulled out of the driveway, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change dramatically. The comfortable, predictable existence he had known was unraveling, thread by thread, and he was powerless to stop it. As the streets of Krakow blurred past his window, Tomasz's mind raced with questions. Who was Karolina really? And what was her connection to Michal? Was the fire at the factory just a coincidence? Or was it somehow related to the secrets being kept in his own home? And most importantly, how would he untangle this web of mystery and deceit without losing everything he held dear? With these thoughts swirling in his mind, Tomasz sped towards the factory, unaware that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test his family, his business, and everything he thought he knew about his life. The acrid smell of smoke hit Tomasz's nostrils before he even stepped out of his car. The night sky over his furniture factory was illuminated by the orange glow of flames, and the wail of fire engines pierced the air. As he rushed towards the building, his heart pounding, he spotted Karolina Witkowska standing near the entrance, her face etched with worry. "Mr. Nowak," she called out, hurrying towards him. "Thank goodness you're here. The firefighters have contained the blaze to the main production area, but the damage—" She trailed off, shaking her head. Tomasz barely heard her words. His eyes were fixed on Karolina's face, searching for any sign that might connect her to the disturbing conversation he had overheard earlier. Was this the same woman his son had been speaking to? The woman who had potentially been involved in an inappropriate relationship with a teenager? "Mr. Nowak." Karolina's voice snapped him back to reality. "Are you all right?" Tomasz blinked, forcing himself to focus on the crisis at hand. Yes. Tell me everything you know about the fire." As Karolina briefed him on the situation, Tomasz's mind raced. He needed to separate his personal suspicions from his professional responsibilities. The factory, his livelihood, was at stake. Yet he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to Karolina than met the eye. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Tomasz spoke with firefighters, insurance agents, and employees who had rushed to the scene. The fire had indeed been contained, but the damage to the main production area was extensive. Months of work and hundreds of thousands of zlotys worth of equipment and materials had gone up in smoke. As the night wore on and the immediate crisis began to subside, Tomasz found himself alone with Karolina in his office, which had mercifully been spared from the flames. He watched her as she pored over inventory lists, her brow furrowed in concentration. In the month since he had hired her, Karolina had proven herself to be competent, dedicated, and ambitious. But now, in light of what he had overheard at home, Tomasz found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about her. "Karolina," he began, his voice carefully neutral, "you've been a great asset to the company since you joined us. I hope you know how much I appreciate your hard work." She looked up, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you, Mr. Nowak. That means a lot to me." Tomasz leaned forward, his eyes never leaving her face. "I'd like to think we've developed a good working relationship, one based on trust and honesty." Karolina's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Is something wrong?" "I'm not sure," Tomasz replied slowly, "but I can't help feeling that there might be something you're not telling me, something that goes beyond our professional relationship." The color drained from Karolina's face. For a moment she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then just as quickly her composure returned. "Mr. Nowak, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I can assure you that I've always been completely professional in my dealings with you and the company." Tomasz nodded, not entirely convinced. "I see. And what about your dealings outside of work? With my family, perhaps?" Karolina's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Your family? Mr. Nowak, I've never even met your family. What are you talking about?" Before Tomasz could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Anna. "Where are you?" "Where are... Michal's gone. Left a note saying he couldn't take the pressure anymore. Please come home now." Tomasz felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. His son was missing, his factory was in ruins, and he was no closer to unraveling the mystery that seemed to be engulfing his life. He stood up abruptly, startling Karolina. "I have to go," he said, his voice tight with worry. "Family emergency. We'll continue this conversation later." As he rushed out of the office, leaving a bewildered Karolina behind, Tomasz's mind was in turmoil. What had driven Michal to run away? And if Karolina wasn't involved, then who was the mysterious woman his son had been talking to? The drive home seemed to take an eternity. When Tomasz finally burst through the front door, he found Anna sitting on the couch, clutching a piece of paper, her eyes red from crying. "He's gone, Tomasz," she sobbed as he sat down beside her. "Our baby is gone." Tomasz put his arm around his wife, trying to comfort her, even as his own heart felt like it was breaking. "What does the note say?" he asked gently. Anna handed him the crumpled paper. In Michal's hurried scrawl, it read, "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry, but I can't live with this secret anymore. It's tearing me apart. I need some time to figure things out. Please don't look for me. I'll come back when I'm ready. I love you both. Michal." Tomasz read the note several times, his mind racing. "What secret?" he murmured. What could be so terrible that he felt he had to run away? Anna looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. "Tomasz, there's something else. After you left, I went through Michal's room looking for clues. I found this hidden in his desk drawer." She handed him a small, worn photograph. Tomasz's breath caught in his throat as he looked at it. The picture showed a much younger version of himself, standing next to a woman he didn't recognize. They were smiling, looking happy and carefree. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was written, "Tomasz and Magda, summer 1999. "I don't understand," Tomasz whispered, staring at the photo. "I don't remember this woman. I don't remember this photo being taken." Anna's voice was barely audible. "Tomasz, that summer, it was right before we met. You told me you had been through a difficult time, that you had lost some of your memories due to stress. Could this be connected?" Tomasz felt as if the room was spinning. Fragments of memories, long buried, began to surface. A warm summer day, laughter, the scent of lilacs, and then nothing. A blank space where months of his life should have been. "I don't know," he said, his voice shaking. "But I think this might be the key to everything. To Michal's behavior, to the woman he was talking to, maybe even to Karolina." Anna looked at him, confusion evident on her face. "Karolina, your new employee. What does she have to do with this?" Tomasz quickly filled Anna in on the suspicions he had developed, the strange coincidences that had occurred. As he spoke, he could see the wheels turning in Anna's mind, connecting the dots just as he had been trying to do. "We need to find Michal," Anna said firmly, wiping away her tears. "And we need to uncover the truth about this photograph, about this Magda woman. It's the only way we'll understand what's happening to our family." Tomasz nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "You're right, but where do we start?" "But where?" Michal could be anywhere. Just then, Tomasz's phone buzzed again. It was another text, this time from an unknown number. "If you want to know the truth about your past and find your son, come to the old clock tower in the main square at midnight. Come alone." Tomasz showed the message to Anna, his heart racing. "It could be a trap," she said, worry evident in her voice. "It could be," Tomasz agreed. "But it might also be our only chance to find Michal and unravel this mystery. I have to go." Anna gripped his hand tightly. "Be careful, Tomasz. I can't lose you too." As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Tomasz made his way to the main square of Krakow. The usually bustling area was eerily quiet at this late hour, the ancient buildings casting long shadows in the moonlight. As he approached the clock tower, he saw a figure standing in the shadows, waiting. His heart pounding, Tomasz stepped forward. "I'm here," he called out. "Who are you? What do you know about my son?" The figure stepped into the light, and Tomasz felt as if the ground had disappeared from beneath his feet. It was the woman from the photograph, older now, but unmistakably the same person, Magda. "Hello, Tomasz," she said, her voice soft and tinged with sadness. "It's been a long time. I think it's finally time we talked about what happened that summer in 1999, and about the son you never knew you had." As Tomasz stood there, rooted to the spot, he realized that his life would never be the same again. The secrets of his past were about to come to light, and with them, the key to his son's disappearance and the strange events that had been unfolding around him. The clock began to strike midnight, each chime seeming to echo the rapid beating of Tomasz's heart. Whatever revelations awaited him, he knew that by the time the sun rose over Krakow, his world would be forever changed. The chiming of the clock tower faded into the night, leaving Tomasz and Magda standing in an uneasy silence. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air between them. A son he never knew he had. Tomasz's mind reeled, struggling to process this earth-shattering revelation. "I don't understand," Tomasz finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "How is this possible? And what does it have to do with Michal?" Magda's eyes, filled with a mixture of sadness and determination, met his. "It's a long story, Tomasz. One that I've carried with me for far too long. But first, tell me, how much do you remember about the summer of 1999? Tomasz shook his head, frustration evident on his face. "Almost nothing. It's like a blank space in my memory. I've always attributed it to stress, but now," he trailed off, the implications of his memory loss suddenly taking on a new, ominous significance. Magda nodded, as if she had expected this response. "We need to talk somewhere more private. There's a small cafe nearby that stays open late. Will you come with me?" Despite his reservations, Tomasz agreed. As they walked through the deserted streets of Krakow, he couldn't help but feel like he was moving through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. His son was missing. His factory was in ruins. And now this woman from his forgotten past was about to reveal secrets that could shatter his entire world. The cafe was dimly lit and empty, save for a sleepy-looking waiter. Magda ordered 2 coffees, and they sat at a corner table, far from prying ears. "Start from the beginning," Tomasz said, his hands wrapped tightly around the warm mug. "I need to know everything." Magda took a deep breath, her eyes focused on some distant point as she began her tale. "In the spring of 1999, we met at a business conference in Warsaw. You were just starting your furniture business, full of dreams and ambition. I was working for a large corporation, feeling trapped and unfulfilled. We connected immediately." As Magda spoke, fragmented images began to surface in Tomasz's mind. A crowded conference hall, the glint of sunlight on long brown hair, the sound of shared laughter. "We fell in love, Tomasz," Magda continued, her voice soft with remembrance. "It was a whirlwind romance. We spent that entire summer together making plans for the future. But then," she paused, her expression clouding. "Then came the accident. We were driving back from a weekend trip to the mountains when a truck swerved into our lane. The crash was terrible. You were severely injured, in a coma for weeks, and I I found out I was pregnant." Tomasz felt as if the air had been sucked out of his lungs. "Pregnant," he repeated, his voice hoarse. Magda nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, but when you woke up, you had no memory of our time together. The doctors said it was retrograde amnesia, likely temporary. Your family was there taking care of you, and I was a stranger to you. Why didn't you tell me?" Tomasz asked, a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, sorrow, warring within him. "I tried," Magda said, her voice breaking. "But your family, especially your mother, they thought it would be too much for you to handle in your fragile state. They made me promise to stay away, to give you time to recover. They said they would tell you when you were stronger." Tomasz's mind was spinning. His own family had kept this from him. "And the child?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "A boy," Magda said softly. "I named him Alexander." "Your mother? She arranged for him to be adopted by a couple who couldn't have children of their own. She said it was for the best, that you weren't in a position to be a father." Tomasz felt as if he might be sick. The magnitude of what had been hidden from him was almost too much to bear. "And Michal? How does he fit into all this?" Magda's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Alexander, your son, he found me a few months ago. He had discovered he was adopted and had been searching for his birth parents. When he learned about you, about your family, he wanted to connect, but he was afraid of disrupting your life." Suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place in Tomasz's mind. "Michal knew," he said, the realization dawning on him. "Somehow, he found out about Alexander." Magda nodded. "Alexander reached out to Michal online. They've been in contact for weeks, trying to figure out how to tell you the truth. The woman you overheard Michal talking to, that was me. We were trying to find the right way to reveal everything." Tomasz leaned back in his chair, feeling as if the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. His son, Michal, had been carrying this burden alone, torn between loyalty to his family and the pull of a brother he had never known. "Where is Michal now?" Tomasz asked, his parental concern overriding everything else for a moment. "He's safe," Magda assured him. "He's with Alexander. They're staying at my apartment on the outskirts of the city. Michal called me right after he left your house. He was distraught, feeling guilty about keeping secrets, but also afraid of how you and Anna would react." Tomasz stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need to see him, both of them, now." Magda rose as well, nodding in understanding. "Of course, I'll take you there." As they left the cafe and made their way to Magda's car, Tomasz's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He thought of Anna, waiting anxiously at home, and realized he needed to call her. But how could he possibly explain all of this over the phone? In the car, as Magda navigated the quiet streets of Krakow, Tomasz finally broke the silence. "There's something I don't understand," he said. "Why now? After all these years, why did Alexander choose to search for us now?" Magda's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "There's more to the story, Tomasz, something I haven't told you yet." She took a deep breath as if steeling herself. "Alexander is sick. He has a rare genetic condition, one that requires a bone marrow transplant. He's been searching for a match, but so far no luck. When he learned he was adopted, he hoped that finding his biological family might lead to a potential donor." The implications of her words hit Tomasz like a physical blow. His son, a young man he had never met, was fighting for his life, and Michal, carrying the weight of this knowledge, had been silently grappling with the possibility of being a match for a brother he had just discovered. As they pulled up to a modest apartment building, Tomasz's heart was racing. In just a few moments he would be face to face with not one, but two sons, the one he had raised and loved for 16 years, and the one he was just learning existed. Magda led him up 3 flights of stairs to a small apartment. She knocked softly, and after a moment the door opened. Michal stood there, his eyes red-rimmed and wide with surprise and fear. "Dad?" he said, his voice cracking. Without a word, Tomasz pulled his son into a tight embrace. "It's okay," he murmured, feeling Michal's body shake with suppressed sobs. "Everything's going to be okay." Over Michal's shoulder, Tomasz saw another young man standing in the background, watching the scene with a mix of longing and apprehension. Alexander, his other son. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark hair, the same set of the jaw. But where Michal was the picture of health, Alexander looked pale and drawn, the weight of his illness evident in his thin frame. As Tomasz met Alexander's eyes, he felt a surge of emotions he couldn't quite name: grief for the years lost, anger at the circumstances that had kept them apart, and an overwhelming desire to protect this young man he had just met. "Hello, Alexander," Tomasz said softly, still holding Michal close. I'm your father." Alexander's eyes filled with tears. "Hello, Dad," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. In that moment, standing in the doorway of a stranger's apartment, Tomasz knew that his life would never be the same. The secrets of the past had been unlocked, bringing with them joy, pain, and a desperate race against time to save a son he never knew he had. As he stepped into the apartment, Tomasz's mind turned to the challenges that lay ahead. How would he explain all of this to Anna? How would they navigate this new family dynamic? And most pressingly, how would they find a way to save Alexander's life? The night was far from over, and Tomasz knew that the coming days would test him in ways he had never imagined. But looking at his two sons, one he had raised and one he was just meeting, he felt a fierce determination take hold. Whatever it took, he would fight for his family, all of his family. The small apartment felt charged with emotion as Tomasz stood between his two sons. Michal, still clinging to his father, looked up with tear-stained eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how." Tomasz gently cupped Michal's face in his hands. "It's okay, son. You're not alone in this anymore." He turned to Alexander, who was watching the exchange with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "And neither are you," Tomasz added, extending his hand. Alexander hesitated for a moment before stepping forward and taking Tomasz's hand. The contact seemed to break something loose in the young man, and suddenly he was enveloped in Tomasz's embrace alongside Michal. For a long moment, the three of them stood there, united in an emotional tableau that spoke volumes about the complexities of family and forgiveness. Magda watched from the doorway, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. As the trio finally separated, Tomasz turned to her. "We need to call Anna," he said. "She needs to know what's happening." Michal's eyes widened in panic. "Mom, but what if she—" "Your mother loves you more than anything in this world," Tomasz interrupted gently. "Yes, this will be a shock, but we're a family. We face things together." With trembling hands, Tomasz dialed Anna's number. When she answered, her voice was thick with worry. "Tomasz, did you find him? Is Michal okay?" "He's safe, Anna," Tomasz assured her. "But there's a lot we need to talk about. Can you come to this address?" He rattled off the location of Magda's apartment. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Tomasz, what's going on? You're scaring me." Tomasz took a deep breath. "Anna, my love, I promise I'll explain everything when you get here. But I need you to be prepared. Our family, it's bigger than we thought." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Anna spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. As they waited for Anna to arrive, Tomasz turned his attention to Alexander. "Tell me about yourself," he said softly. "I've missed so much of your life. I want to know everything." Alexander, still seeming unsure of his place in this newfound family dynamic, began to speak hesitantly. He told Tomasz about growing up in Gdansk with his adoptive parents, about his passion for marine biology and his dreams of becoming a researcher. But as he spoke, the toll of his illness became increasingly apparent. He tired quickly, his words occasionally punctuated by a dry cough that seemed to rattle his entire frame. Tomasz felt his heart constrict with each cough. The urge to protect, to fix everything was overwhelming. "We'll find a donor," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes, we'll make sure you get the treatment you need." Before Alexander could respond, there was a knock at the door. Magda opened it to reveal Anna, her face pale and drawn with worry. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the scene before her. Tomasz and Michal standing close together, and the unfamiliar young man who bore such a striking resemblance to her husband. "Anna," Tomasz said, moving to her side, "there's someone you need to meet." He gestured towards Alexander. "This is Alexander. He's my son." Anna's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" she gasped. "Tomasz, what are you talking about?" Over the next hour, Tomasz and Magda recounted the events of that long-ago summer, the accident and the decisions that had led to this moment. Anna listened in stunned silence, her gaze moving between Tomasz, Alexander and Michal, who sat with his head bowed, unable to meet his mother's eyes. When the story was finally told, Anna stood up abruptly. For a heart-stopping moment, Tomasz feared she might leave, unable to cope with this radical shift in their family's reality. Instead, She walked over to Alexander and without a word pulled him into a tight embrace. "You must have been so scared," she murmured, stroking his hair as if he were a small child, facing all of this alone. Alexander, caught off guard by this unconditional acceptance, broke down in tears. "I didn't want to disrupt your lives," he sobbed, "but I didn't know where else to turn." Anna held him tighter, looking over his shoulder at Michal. "Come here," she said softly, extending her arm. Michal hesitated for only a moment before joining the embrace, his own tears flowing freely. Tomasz watched the scene unfold, overwhelmed by the depth of his love for this woman who could, in the face of such shocking news, respond with such compassion and grace. As the emotional storm began to subside, they all sat down to discuss the pressing issue at hand, Alexander's health. "The doctors say I need a bone marrow transplant within the next few months," Alexander explained. "Without it," he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "We'll all get tested," Anna said firmly. "Tomasz, Michal and me, and we'll reach out to our extended family too. We'll find a match, Alexander. You're part of our family now, and we take care of our own." Tomasz nodded in agreement, but a nagging thought pulled at him. "There's something else we need to consider," he said slowly. "My mother, she knew about Alexander all along. She was the one who arranged the adoption." The room fell silent as the implications of this sank in. Michal was the first to speak up. "Grandma? But why would she keep this a secret?" Tomasz sighed heavily. "I don't know, son, but we need to talk to her. She might have information that could help us find a donor for Alexander." As the night wore on into the early hours of the morning, plans were made. They would all go to get tested for bone marrow compatibility the next day. Tomasz would reach out to his mother, demanding answers about the past, and they would face whatever came next as a family. A larger, more complex family than they had ever imagined, but a family nonetheless. As dawn broke over Krakow, Tomasz found himself standing on the small balcony of Magda's apartment, looking out over the awakening city. Anna joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Tomasz turned to look at her, marveling at the strength and love he saw in her eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything's changed. I feel like I'm standing on shifting sand." Anna squeezed his hand. "Some things haven't changed. Tomasz, I love you. We love our children, both of them. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Inside the apartment, Michal and Alexander had fallen asleep on the couch, their heads tilted together in a way that emphasized their brotherly resemblance. Magda was in the kitchen, quietly preparing coffee for what promised to be a long and challenging day ahead. As Tomasz looked at this tableau, his expanded family, brought together by secrets and separated by years, now united in the face of a life-threatening illness, he felt a complex mix of emotions. There was fear for Alexander's health, anger at the secrets that had been kept, and uncertainty about the future. But overshadowing it all was a profound sense of love and determination. "You're right," he said to Anna, pulling her close. "We're in this together, and we'll do whatever it takes to save our son." As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting a golden light over Krakow, Tomasz knew that the coming days would be filled with difficult conversations, medical tests and emotional upheavals. He would have to confront his mother about her role in keeping Alexander a secret. He would need to navigate the complex emotions of having two sons, one he had raised and one he was just getting to know, and hanging over it all was the urgent need to find a bone marrow donor for Alexander. But looking at Anna, feeling the strength of her love and support, Tomasz felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The secrets of the past had been revealed, shaking the foundations of everything he thought he knew about his life and his family. But from those shaken foundations, something new and powerful was emerging. A family bound not just by blood, but by choice, by love, and by the shared determination to fight for each other no matter what. As they turned to go back inside, to wake the boys and begin the journey that lay ahead, Tomasz felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever happened next, they would face it together as a family. And in that unity, he found the strength to take the first step into this new, uncharted future. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity for the newly expanded Nowak family. Days were filled with hospital visits, medical tests, and anxious waiting for results. Nights were spent in long emotional conversations as they all tried to adjust to their new reality. Tomasz's confrontation with his mother, Helena, had been difficult and heart-wrenching. The elderly woman had broken down in tears, confessing that she had only wanted to protect her son after the accident. "You were so fragile, Tomasz," she had sobbed. "I thought I was doing what was best for you." While Tomasz struggled to forgive his mother for her well-intentioned but misguided actions, he couldn't deny the relief he felt when she agreed to be tested as a potential bone marrow donor for Alexander. Every possibility, no matter how small, had to be explored. As the days turned into weeks, Alexander's condition began to deteriorate. The young man tried to put on a brave face, but Tomasz could see the fear in his eyes, the way his hands would tremble when he thought no one was looking. It broke Tomasz's heart to see his newfound son suffering, knowing that time was running out. Michal, for his part, had thrown himself wholeheartedly into the role of supportive brother. He spent hours with Alexander, sharing stories of their childhood experiences, finding common ground in their shared love of science and nature. Tomasz often found them huddled over Michal's laptop, watching documentaries about marine life, Alexander's passion, or discussing the latest advancements in environmental conservation. Anna had been a pillar of strength throughout it all. She coordinated with doctors, researched alternative treatments, and kept the household running smoothly despite the chaos that had engulfed their lives. Tomasz marveled at her capacity for love and acceptance, watching as she embraced Alexander as her own without hesitation. But as the weeks wore on with no suitable donor found, the atmosphere in the Nowak household grew increasingly tense. The strain was beginning to show on everyone's faces, etched in the dark circles under their eyes and the tight lines around their mouths. It was on a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon that everything changed. Tomasz was at the factory, trying to catch up on work that had been neglected in the wake of recent events, when his phone rang. It was Anna, her voice trembling with excitement. "Tomasz, come to the hospital right away," she said. "They've found a match for Alexander." Tomasz felt his heart leap in his chest. "Who?" he asked, he already reaching for his coat. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "It's Karolina," Anna said softly. "Karolina Witkowska." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Tomasz tried to process this information. Karolina, his employee, the woman he had initially suspected of an inappropriate relationship with Michal, was now potentially the key to saving Alexander's life. When Tomasz arrived at the hospital, he found his family gathered in the waiting room. Michal was pacing nervously, while Anna sat with her arm around Alexander, who looked both hopeful and terrified. And there, standing slightly apart from the group, was Karolina. As Tomasz approached her, Karolina's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Nowak," she said. "I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how." "Told me what?" Tomasz asked, confusion evident in his voice. Karolina took a deep breath. I'm your half-sister, your father. He had an affair with my mother years ago. I only found out recently, when I was doing some genealogical research. That's why I came to work at your factory. I wanted to get to know you, to understand where I came from." Tomasz felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. Another secret, another piece of his past that had been hidden from him. But as he looked at Karolina's face, seeing his own features reflected back at him, he felt a sudden surge of connection. "And now you're going to save my son's life," he said softly, pulling her into a tight embrace. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Doctors explained procedures, nurses prepared equipment, and the family huddled together, offering words of encouragement to both Alexander and Karolina. As Alexander was wheeled into surgery, Tomasz felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. He turned to Anna, burying his face in her shoulder as he finally allowed himself to cry. The surgery lasted for hours, each minute feeling like an eternity to the anxious family in the waiting room. Michal alternated between nervous pacing and sitting with his head in his hands. Anna moved from person to person, offering comfort and support. Tomasz found himself holding tightly to Karolina's hand, this newfound sister who had become an unexpected lifeline for his family. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through the hospital windows, the doctor emerged from the operating room. The exhausted family held their breath, waiting for news. "The surgery was successful," the doctor announced, a tired smile on his face. "Both Alexander and Karolina are doing well. We'll need to monitor Alexander closely over the next few weeks, but we're cautiously optimistic." The waiting room erupted in tears of joy and relief. Tomasz felt as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to hope, to believe that everything might truly be okay. As the days passed, Alexander's condition steadily improved. Color returned to his cheeks and his cough gradually subsided. Tomasz split his time between the hospital and home, watching with wonder as his two sons grew closer, as Karolina was welcomed into the family fold, and as Anna continued to be the glue that held them all together. 6 months later, on a bright summer day reminiscent of that long-ago summer when it had all begun, the Nowak family gathered in their backyard for a celebration. Alexander, now fully recovered, stood tall and strong, his arm around Michal's shoulders. Karolina chatted animatedly with Anna, while Helena, Tomasz's mother, looked on with a mixture of joy and lingering guilt. As Tomasz surveyed the scene, he felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. The past year had been a whirlwind of emotions: fear, anger, confusion, and ultimately, love. The secrets of the past had threatened to tear his family apart, but instead they had brought them closer together, expanding their circle of love in ways he never could have imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Anna asked, coming to stand beside him. Tomasz smiled, pulling her close. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are," he said. "How all of this could have gone so differently, but instead we have more love in our lives than ever before," Anna finished for him, her eyes shining with happiness. As the afternoon wore on, filled with laughter, good food, and the warmth of family, Tomasz found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain of the past, the secrets that had been kept, the fears they had faced, all of it had led to this: a family expanded, bonds strengthened, and a future filled with hope. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Tomasz stood up, clinking his glass to get everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "to family. Not just the one we're born into, but the one we choose, the one we fight for, the one we create through love and forgiveness." As glasses were raised and a chorus of "to family" echoed through the backyard, Tomasz looked around at the faces of his loved ones. Michal and Alexander, brothers united by blood and shared experiences. Karolina, the sister he never knew he had, now an integral part of their lives. His mother Helena, seeking redemption for past mistakes. And Anna, his rock, his partner through it all. In that moment, Tomasz knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. The secrets of the past had been unlocked, bringing with them pain and uncertainty, but also opening the door to a richer, more expansive love than he had ever thought possible. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Tomasz wrapped his arm around Anna, pulled Michal and Alexander close, and smiled at Karolina. This was his family, complex, imperfect, and utterly precious, and he wouldn't have it any other way. The evening wound down, filled with quiet conversations and comfortable silences. As the last of their guests departed, Tomasz stood on the porch, looking out at the peaceful night. He felt Anna's presence beside him, her hand slipping into his. "We made it," she said softly. Tomasz nodded, squeezing her hand. "We did, and whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As they turned to go inside, where their sons were cleaning up and chatting quietly, Tomasz felt a sense of peace settle over him. The secrets of the past had been revealed, the storms weathered, and in their wake, a stronger, more loving family had emerged. It wasn't the life he had expected, but as he closed the door behind him, Tomasz knew it was the life he was meant to have, full of challenges, surprises, and above all, love.